Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota, and when I woke up this morning, I didn't have to listen to Mark Sanchez, so it's been a good day so far.
Will Ragatz, cover the Vikings for SI.com. And Patrick Mahomes is the greatest quarterback who's ever walked this earth. Last night was another reminder of that.
This is Arif Hasan with Pro Football Network. I am in Boston Logan Airport, where Mark Wahlberg has a restaurant called Wahlburgers. I think that's great.
Luke Inman here, Superior Sports Talk, ready to get the Matt Daniels Special Teams Coach of the Year hype train started.
So Will Ragatz filling in today, but wait, where's Luke Braun?
We got a double doink in London! Vikings win and go to 3-0, 28-25. Most frustrating game I've ever seen. I'm going to have so much to say about this one later. But for now, let's go! Vikings! Oh, Vikings! Picking up the score. We'll talk about it on Locked On Vikings on Monday.
Oh, it's so good.
It's the Minnesota football party. Let's get it going.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcasts. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota football party. It's your guys hanging out talking next-level Vikings football. Plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota football party. And it starts now.
Welcome in. It's the Minnesota football party on Locked On Sports Minnesota. Once again, I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota, the Ron Johnson Show in particular. Luke Inman, Superior Sports Talk, Arif Hasan, Pro Football Network, and Will Ragatz filling in for just an exuberant Luke Braun. He is at Will Ragatz on Twitter. Check out his work at Sports Illustrated Inside the Vikings. On today's show, we've got quarter season grades, offense, defense, special teams, and coaching. We talk about the double doink. Justin Jefferson goes off, but the offense can't score, and the injury bug hitting the Minnesota Vikings. Quick reminder that the Locked On Sports Minnesota app is available on Amazon Fire and Roku. It's a great viewing experience. You can get all of our programming right on Amazon Fire or Roku with the Locked On Sports Minnesota app. Check it out. Gentlemen, you woke up on Sunday morning, flipped on the telly, or in Arif's case, went to the game. Curious to hear about Arif's experience at the game because he actually didn't have to wake up early for it. Let's start with you, Arif. You were there. You're now in Boston at an airport once again. That's your new habitat for our podcast, I guess. How was the game?
It was fantastic. I mean, the atmosphere was phenomenal. Tottenham Stadium is beautiful. They couldn't have picked like a better stadium for this to happen, and it was gorgeous, and I had a ton of fun. But yeah, I mean, it's always strange when you go to like a neutral site game where you expect to see kind of a lot of fans of both teams, but a lot of fans of neither team. And so it was like whenever either team was on offense, there was a ton of noise. They had to adapt to that. And they would just like randomly break out into various team chants, primarily Vikings and Saints, but occasionally, another random team chant. I've never been in an atmosphere like it. It was a ton of fun.
So I've got an early party foul. For those of us that had to watch at home, the camera work on the double doink left a lot to be desired. Like the NFL Network, they had a tough time in general. But I didn't really know what happened until they showed the replay. I mean, you could see the ball kind of deflecting, but the scoreboard got in the way. So Will Ragatz, you're watching at home. You see that come off of Wil Lutz's foot. And after seeing him hit the 60, you just assume this is going to be good. And somehow, and the slow-mo video is unreal watching that thing back. How does that not go through the uprights?
Yeah, it doesn't really make any sense. As soon as he kicked it, I thought it was going in. Just he had made the previous one, and it looked true. I mean, just in terms of the accuracy that we could see. But yeah, they panned down like a half second too late for you to tell what happened. So you just see it hit the ground. You're not sure if it went in front of the crossbar, behind the crossbar, and then it wasn't until the refs actually signaled and the Vikings started celebrating that I knew it happened. But yeah, the replay is insane. I mean, I think it's even crazier that not the same stakes, but the famous Chicago double doink, like this one just, if it's even like a fraction of an inch to the right or whatever it was, like that thing could go in, and this is an entirely different conversation if the Vikings lose in overtime. So crazy ending to a what turned out to be a wild game.
Yeah, we're talking about the soft defense with 24 seconds left, the catch over the middle, Harrison Smith getting hit in a sensitive area and costing the Vikings valuable seconds there off the clock. Luke, was it always called was the double doink called the double doink until Cody Parkey did it for the Bears? Like, was that the first double doink in football history that we can recall? And is this the second double doink? What's the history of double doinks? I don't even know.
You're asking the wrong guy, Sam. I have no idea. I just think it's a lot of fun to say double doink, and being on the right side of that double doink yesterday, just a cherry on top. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, that was wild. There are a lot of angles to get into in this game. So before we kind of talk quarter season grades, it feels weird. It feels really weird because the Vikings have struggled for the most part in 2 consecutive weeks. The underlying numbers on offense and defense are thoroughly average, if not below average. And if you lose either of these games, the Vikings are getting eviscerated today. I mean, they're getting eviscerated all week. So it feels weird to talk about things in such a positive light, and you kind of have to. They're 3-1. They have won the games at the end, which they were not doing last year. It's hard to quantify the impact of a coach, but they are playing down the stretch better in the Kevin O'Connell era than the end of the Mike Zimmer era. So that counts for something. Arif, how do you contextualize this 3-1 team that some people might say is a little fraudulent?
Every so often we get like this conversation like blank team is the worst blank team of all time or the best blank team of all time. I remember the Packers when they were 13-3 were the quote worst 13-3 team of all time. The Giants were the worst 2-0 team of all time.
The best one was the Panthers, or the worst 15-1 team of all time? That's my favorite.
Oh, I like that. That's good. But yeah, those conversations will pop up, and I actually really enjoy them. I can see why fans are very annoyed by that kind of conversation, but I do enjoy them because it gives us some context for who the team is. And I feel like while the Vikings are not the worst 3-1 team of all time by any reasonable stretch of the imagination, you can see like why I brought it up, right? Because the record does not reflect, the quality of play that we've seen from them. They've had one good game. I think I tweeted out they're 2-1 in moral losses, right? Like they just don't play well. They haven't played well. They haven't played in any way that instills any confidence. The defense feels like that they will give up a lot of points at any moment. The fact that they didn't give up a ton of points in the final half of either of those two, the Lions or the Eagles game, I don't think anybody is taking anything away from that. That doesn't feel like, hey, this is a defense that tightened up. It feels like a defense that stopped effing up, right? Like there's a total difference there, right? And so there's no confidence in the defense. The offense can't seem to score when it gets into the red zone, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more. And they don't seem to have answers when defenses pose problems, right? And if that's the case, what is the team doing? So I guess it feels like an 8-9, 9-8 team, maybe 8-1 team, but it's even hard to say that. I don't know what the team feels like.
Yeah, and Luke Inman, I guess I don't know if we're going to learn that much more in the next 2 weeks either, because the Vikings could stumble into a win against the Bears easily. They could not play well, and they could easily win that game. Maybe they face Teddy in week 6. Maybe they limp to a win against Miami. We could keep having this conversation, but eventually the record is what you are. So is this team worthy of being taken seriously? Or if not, what would they need to do to prove that they will be taken seriously?
Well, I like what you opened with. Like, if they lose either of those last 2 games, fans are probably really laying it on KOC all week. You win these close games, it makes the offensive struggle specifically easier to swallow. Go back and watch the film. But, Sam, it's like at the same time, what are we saying if Justin Jefferson hauls in that drop touchdown pass, or if they don't have some of those killer penalties in the red zone? And, talking about the offense, honing in on that specifically, I don't think the sputtering offense is all on one thing right now. Kirk still doesn't look totally comfortable back there. Panicky, double clutching that ball, second guessing. But when he is making the right reads, guys are dropping passes. Johnny Munn, JJ, CJ Ham. Penalties were a killer yesterday. Saints shot themselves in the foot more with 10 penalties for 105 yards to the Vikings 5, but they were at critical moments. First and goal from the 3, you get a delay a game. 2 penalties from Brian O'Neill. When's the last time we've said that? Cousins with the grounding penalty, the pick play on Osborne wiped out that TD. So it's not just one thing right now. And the great news is I think, is that the large majority of this stuff is correctable. It's self-inflicting that you can clean up. So there's a lot of reason for optimism, I think, no matter what they do in these next 2 games. But at the same time, a lot of reason why fans should be frustrated, because you see how much meat's on the bone right now that they're leaving. 3-1, awfully nice, feels good. So many missed opportunities, though, that you can call out in all 4 of these games that they played this season.
Will, let's get your thoughts on it. Is this a fraudulent 3-1 team, or is this going to be a sign of things to come? Vikings winning close games, building up that record.
Yeah, I mean, you can always look at things one of 2 ways. I think the pessimistic view is, hey, this team could easily be 2-2, 1-3. They're probably due for some regression. You're not going to be able to win every close game. I mean, you also aren't going to lose every close game like they did last year a lot of time. But the optimistic view is, hey, they're not playing very well. They're 4 games into this kind of new scheme, new era, new systems, and they're still finding ways to win games, which is encouraging, because then if you start to correct some of these things and fix some of the mistakes, then maybe you start. This is what KOC has said after every game. Like, we need to get more consistent so we don't have to come back. It doesn't have to be this dramatic ending. And that could start next week against the Bears, who are a great opportunity to kind of get right. I mean, it feels weird to say a team needs to get right when they've won 2 in a row, but if the Vikings are able to come out, fix some things, score touchdowns in the red zone, figure something out defensively to play a little better, which shouldn't be too hard against this Bears offense, then you start feeling a little better about yourself if they're able to win that comfortably and go into that Miami game riding a 3-game winning streak.
Yeah, 26th in red zone, 28th on third down right now. This offense is failing in the critical moments, and I think that's why it's hard to be bullish on Kirk and KOC when really no one is overperforming except maybe the offensive line. And you don't see some of those creative elements that you hope to see. There's nothing groundbreaking about this offense. In fact, we saw maybe even better versions of this offense under previous coordinators. So there's still time to improve that, obviously, and there is a learning curve, but I think fans are going to get antsy to see that. And if a loss or 2 comes their way, then it becomes even more difficult to swallow. I like what you said, Luke, though, about there were some moments where in the red zone, if they just make a simple play, we might be looking at it differently. Maybe they win that game more easily. Maybe they score 35 points. A drop by Munt on 3rd and 1. O'Neal had a false start that kind of harpooned the one drive, along with the bizarre clock management thing at the end of the first half. Jefferson drops it on the adjustment behind him. He probably needs to haul that in. So there are things that won't always happen. You're not always gonna drop a really nice play on 3rd and 1 where Munt was going to roll maybe into the end zone. So that's not always going to happen. So I guess if you compare it to the Philadelphia game where Kirk was throwing YOLO picks into the end zone, this was improvement on that. The Vikings did score on 7 of 11 drives, but you're going to need to convert when you play legitimate opponents. And the Saints were completely banged up. Their offense was in shambles, and yet they still kind of had the Vikings on their heels there in the second half. Any diagnoses on your part, Arif, on why this offense is struggling to finish the deal when it gets deep into opponent territory?
I mean, like, first thing to note is that the good news is that, red zone touchdown rate is subject to significant regression. It tends not to sustain itself, whatever it's at, and it tends to meet in the middle somewhere. The reason that that's the case, I don't know. It might be because of a small sample size. It might also be because teams, make corrections, the same way that fumble rates tend to regress because teams make corrections. And I think that if that's the case, with the corrections that they need to make, some of them I think have to do with Kirk Cousins. I think that this is probably the most, quote unquote, accurate Kirk Cousins game so far this year. That includes the Green Bay game, I'm saying, in terms of getting the ball to hit the receiver's hands. But in terms of enabling the receiver to do as much as they can, we didn't see that, right? Like maybe the Johnny Munt one was a pretty good throw. But the 2 Justin Jefferson drops, right? There's the one in the end zone and there's the one that got dislodged as he got hit. Both of those were primarily, I think, because of Kirk. The ball placement on the end zone one and just kind of the late timing on the other one that allowed the defensive back to get to him. And just we kind of see this again and again where the ball placement's not spectacular and the receivers are having to make adjustments, particularly high. He's throwing high a lot this year. Don't know why that is. And I think that has a bigger impact in the red zone when, windows are tighter, defenders are closer, they've got the ability to impact the reception a lot. So I think that's playing a role. I think also, I mean, the run game is bad, right? Like that matters in the red zone, right? It's kind of one of the few places where I think everybody kind of agrees that the running game is significant, especially as you get to the goal line. And if you cannot run the ball, it becomes so much harder to score on a consistent basis in the red zone. So I think those two are probably the biggest reasons. I think that they'll probably make some corrections, invest in some play design opportunities, and change what they do in the red zone, and just in terms of like the way that they want to approach some of these problems. But for now, it is kind of a disaster that has like multiple causes.
Will Ragatz, how do you look at the offensive struggles?
Yeah, the red zone stuff is weird because you can pick apart each one, and it's kind of random. Like the Munt drop, which was followed up by Kevin O'Connell at 7-7 at the time, deciding to kick a field goal on 4th and 1 from the 28, which maybe you could say he should be a little bit more aggressive there. There's the penalties, which are probably mostly random. You don't see Brian O'Neill commit a lot of penalties. But if there's one thing that's concerning to me, it's just the Kirk Cousins aspect where, like, is he good enough to consistently finish these drives? Because there's some accuracy stuff, the ball behind Jefferson. There's also just the decision making and is he making the right reads that you can talk about for any quarterback, but there's a pretty blatant one when Jefferson comes open in the back corner of the end zone and Cousins checks it down to Adam Thielen for 2 yards. And people will say, like, Marshawn Lattimore was there. He was, in my eyes, he was kind of already breaking towards Thielen on that play, and there's a chance to put a ball in the back of the end zone where only Jefferson could get it. I think Kirk kind of admitted that himself after the game. Like, yeah, I thought the safety was sinking, and or the corner was sinking, and he wasn't. So that would be the one concern for me, is just the Kirk Cousins element of it. And obviously, we've seen him play well and finish drives in the end zone a lot of time, but I need to see a little bit more to feel really confident that he is going to be able to cap off a lot of these drives with 7 points.
Well, why don't we just go around, Luke? I want your thoughts on the offense, and then let's give a Kirk grade to kick off our quarter season grade. So, Luke, why is the offense struggling, and what is Kirk's grade through 4 games?
Well, I think Will made a lot of good points about Kirk. He's just simply not comfortable yet in this offense for a variety of reasons. But I'll go back to what Arif mentioned. This running game is not doing him any favors right now. It's in the bottom third in multiple categories. Yesterday, Dalvin had a really hard time getting anything going. And it's one thing, if you're struggling, the average per attempt isn't that high. But when you're not able to get 2, 3, or 4 yards on even just some of those carries, it makes things so much harder on third and long situations. And Kirk knows they're pinning their ears back. He's getting panicky. Again, he's double clutching. He just doesn't look comfortable. That running game, both just in between the 20s and in the red zone, like Arif mentioned, needs to get going here. And they need to try a few different things, a few different wrinkles to try to get Dalvin or Madison cooking down in the red zone specifically. I think that'll help open up things. So far, I'd give Kirk probably a C+. I think he's average. Again, Arif mentioned some of these throws are just not on target. The CJ Ham wheel route. Yeah, CJ, it did hit his hands, but also probably could have been thrown a little bit better as well. He's also dealt with a lot of drops, so you got to give him a little bit of grace there too. But I think he's just been average so far. But again, a lot of potential to grow here. I think it's normal, 8 years under a somewhat similar offensive scheme. All of a sudden you get this new playbook, new verbiage, new wrinkles, a lot of different personnel looks and things like that the first couple of weeks you're going to struggle, but you see the potential is there to grow. So C+ would be my grade right now through 4 weeks on Kirk Cousins.
Feels like about the over-under, C+. So would you go over or under that grade, Arif?
It kind of depends on how much of a curve we're grading against, right? Because the quarterback play around the league this year has been pretty putrid, right? Mm-hmm. And so in that context, you could say, hey, Kirk Cousins has not been as bad as some of these high-level quarterbacks. I mean, like, even when Aaron Rodgers has looked in rhythm, right? Like, last week against Tampa Bay, he had a couple of moments where he looked in rhythm. He also looked out of rhythm for the rest of the game. Obviously this last week I think was his best game so far, but like you could make the case that, Cousins has been playing better than him, which is wild to me, right? And so if you just take into account the fact that the only quarterbacks that seem to be playing well are like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and like Trevor Lawrence, I guess somehow, as well as Jalen Hurts. I think that you can say, within that context, Kirk Cousins is a B minus, right, or a B even, right? But I think that in terms of our expectations, in terms of the way that we think that the offense should be moving forward, and also take into account all the expectations that are placed upon him because of things like the contract, yeah, I would stick him around a C or a C minus for sure. I think I'm going to stick with that over under area.
Will?
Yeah, well, first I want to throw three more quarterbacks that are playing well that Arif left out. Mahomes, Herbert, and Geno Smith are all balling right now. So
Geno.
shout out to those. Shout out to those guys. Geno was awesome yesterday. I mean, it doesn't really count when you're playing the Lions defense that just doesn't exist. But yeah, it's a good point that Arif makes. I think I'm at a C plus. Like the Eagles game is a D or an F, so that hurts him a lot. The Packers game, I think the stat line looks a little better than he performed just because there's a lot of layup, wide open throws because the Packers decided not to cover Justin Jefferson. Then these last 2 weeks, like you can knock him for various things, but end of the day, you got to give him some credit for, hey, he hit the throw to KJ Osborne, 2 throws to KJ Osborne in the final drive against the Lions. And then he steps up with kind of a classic Kirk Cousins 40-yard go ball off an outside release to Jefferson late in that Saints game yesterday and drops it right in the bucket, and that sets up the go-ahead field goal. So there's plenty of stuff that he can improve on. I think Luke's point is very true. Like he just doesn't seem to be really clicking in this offense quite yet. But I think that might get there because of the familiarity with Kevin O'Connell and because of the weapons that he has and the way the offensive line outside of yesterday has been playing. Like the opportunity will be there for Kirk to keep playing better. But we'll see if he can do it. But I think C plus is fair through 4 games.
Yeah, if C plus is the line, I would go slightly under at the C, and I do give him major credit for the end of the Lions and the end of the Saints games where he did make the necessary throws, and he could have melted in those situations and has melted in the past. There he is smiling on the mural in London.
That is such a cursed
they don't need to tear it down. But hey, he's 20th in QBR. He's like 20th in EPA.
Mm-hmm.
He's around 20th in completion percentage. He's been very inaccurate this year, which we alluded to. So there's a lot of issues to clean up. And then when one of those 4 games he literally threw you out of in the second half, you have to dock him for that. Like that kind of offsets one of those game-winning go-ahead drives. So I will land right at a solid C. Before we get into our quarter season grades overall, offense, defense, special teams, a reminder that this episode is brought to you by betonline.net, your number one source for all sports wagering info. Check out that Bears-Vikings line for this coming Sunday. The Vikings are 7-point favorites over under 42.5 against the woeful Bears offense. Now, that's a team with offensive issues. You can also get NCAA football lines, MLB, UFC, MMA, golf. It's all there, your top source for all sports wagering info, developments, news, scores, betonline.net. Check it out on your laptop, on mobile, and get all the information. BetOnline, where the game starts. We'll also have a 4-minute drill after our quarter season grades. We'll let Will get his feet wet in our 4-minute drill. But let's go around the horn. We'll start with Luke Inman. And keep your explanations pretty fast, but your offensive grade through the first 4 weeks, Luke.
Offensive grade, I'm probably going to lean heavily on, obviously, the quarterback grade, which I gave a C+. I'll give it a C because I don't think the running game has done much either. You mentioned it earlier. The offensive line has been the lone bright spot outside of yesterday. And give some credit to the Saints defensive line in front 7, Demario Davis, Cameron Jordan, Marcus Davenport. That's a solid front 7 that they faced, but clearly their worst outing of the season. Up until that point, though, Brian O'Neill, pass run block win rate in the top 5 in multiple categories. Christian Darrisaw was in the top 10 as well. They've been really solid, but overall, the running game, for whatever reason, they need to start switching some things up. I don't know exactly what that is going to be, but hopefully they can get some different looks in there because this running game, again, the way it's stalling, it's not doing this offense any favors. And I think as well, too, maybe they're getting to a point where they just need to, instead of force feeding Dalvin, maybe try to pass to set up the run later in the game. Maybe they're not finding the right rhythm or kind of marriage between the run and the pass right now. And for whatever reason, that running game's just not clicking. Dalvin, we know, is kind of a boomer bust runner as is, but he's just not, kind of striking that long one. So his struggles, I think, are making Kirk's life a little bit more difficult than it probably will be as we continue to move on over these next few weeks. But overall, yeah, Sam, I would go with a C.
Arif?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with a C minus. I think that makes the most sense to me. I mean, they have an average points per drive. They've got an average DVOA, any other kind of offensive metric that you want to use. They're about 15th to 18th in the league, and I think a lot of that has to do with the way the passing game has gone. I think that, we've had some really good Justin Jefferson moments, which would buoy the grade of the offense. We've had some really good moments from Christian Darrisaw and Brian O'Neill, excepting last night. That I think generally boosts the grade, but we've seen some really poor performances from the run blocking unit, the interior unit in particular. We've seen some poor performances even from Dalvin Cook. I think that drags that down. And I think that when you take a look at, kind of the points that they've scored, which is about 2 per drive, a little bit less, a lot of that is helped by the fantastic field position that they've been able to get, whether that's because of opportunistic defense or more likely because of how good that special teams unit is. And so once I think you account for that, I think the points that they've scored, that comes into a lot more context. So to me, that's a bit of a C minus, probably not a D plus, but kind of hovering around that area.
And the scoring percentage is at 22nd in the league, number of drives that are resulting in points. And that includes yesterday where they were 7 of 11. Wasn't great in the 3 games before that. Will Ragatz, your grade?
Yeah, I'll stick with a basic C. I mean, high points, Justin Jefferson, at least 2 of the games. The offensive line for the most part, especially those tackles. And there's been moments where it looks like it could really be something. And O'Connell's play calling is creative, and they're marrying the run and the pass, and using the illusion of complexity and all these things that he talks about. And you can see the vision and see where it could become a good offense. The reality is, I mean, we have to go off the results. It just hasn't been a particularly good offense. The interior O-line, Dalvin Cook hasn't really looked like himself to me. And yesterday, especially, like, I don't know if the shoulder thing's in his head at all. He's dealt with that before, but I would have liked to see them maybe mix in a little more Alexander Madison. We'll see if they start to use maybe CJ Ham more, because they've kind of gone away from him, like, other than throwing a 30-yard go ball to him for whatever reason. Like, they've gone away from him as a lead blocker a lot. So I don't know if that's something they'll want to mix back in, because Dalvin Cook had a lot of success with that. But yeah, results-wise, C.
Yeah, I, for one, am flabbergasted that Dalvin Cook did not perform up to standards while playing through a pretty bad shoulder injury. That's just stunning. I just look at this offense, and I don't see them getting the most out of players that we know they can get a lot out of. And I don't see them getting anything new out of kind of the wild cards, right? Like, I don't see them getting anything out of Jalen Reagor or Kene Nwangwu or Ty Chandler, who hasn't been active. Jalen Naylor, other than like a fake punt. Like, what would impress me is if they found a new way to use pieces. And we've seen Justin Jefferson be really hot or really cold. Adam Thielen does his thing. KJ Osborne does his thing. But there's nothing groundbreaking here yet to me. And maybe that's a false expectation to think that a new coach can come in and have that impact. But you're taking a pretty good offense from before. Like, this was an offense that needed to go from good to great. This is not a situation where you just are okay with good because they were terrible. No, you needed them to be great. So for that reason, I'm going with a C-. Run game not helping matters at all. Let's move on to the defense, and I think that we're probably going to be in that same range once again. Let's reverse the order, though. Let's go Will Ragatz first.
Yeah, defensively, this may seem harsh, but I might go D+. Like, I don't know. It's been a really kind of maddening unit when you look at. It seems like they're refusing to switch up what's getting taken advantage of and make adjustments, because they've just been sitting in these soft zones and letting kind of team like Andy Dalton, Jared Goff type quarterbacks kind of pick them apart and make easy reads and just have guys wide open consistently. And there's been moments they've come up with some turnovers, which has been big. But they haven't put 2 good halves of football together all year, unless you want to maybe say the Packers game, where there were a couple opportunities for Green Bay to score more. Like, first half against Philly was abysmal. First half against the Detroit was abysmal. They started out pretty well in London, but like, that's what you should do against a team that doesn't have its top quarterback, its top running back, its top wide receiver, its left guard. Like, that was they were just playing to my expectation. And then in the second half, they just looked like the same team we'd seen the previous couple of weeks early on. Like, the last 4 drives the Saints had, they moved the ball with ease, scored 2 touchdowns, had a set up a couple long field goals pretty quickly. So it's been disappointing. I haven't seen much from Danielle Hunter in this new scheme. Za'Darius Smith has been probably their most impactful player, but he was limited to 25-ish snaps yesterday with a knee injury. So again, it's like with the offense, the pieces are there, I think, but we just haven't really seen it come to life yet.
Yeah, well stated. Arif?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to stick with a D as well. I don't know if a D minus really exists in most grading systems. I don't think I would pick it anyway. But yeah, I think that they tend to give up all kinds of yards and points. They don't tend to accomplish what they need to accomplish on a particular drive. Like Will said, they haven't put together a decent full game of football since week 1. I think that the issues run deep. I think that the pass rush to me is kind of fine, but the reason it's not showing up is because of the back end, right? We're seeing problems from Jordan Hicks. We're seeing some issues from Shannon Sullivan. We're seeing a bunch of really high highs and a bunch of really low lows from Cameron Dancer. We're seeing a lot of communication errors on the back end. There are all kinds of problems that make it impossible for the pass rush to get home, which complicates the entirety of the defense. And then the pass rush is kind of built to be almost uniquely a pass rush and not a run defense. It's not very good at defending the run despite the investments that they've made there. And so altogether, there's just like not anything that the defense does particularly well when you kind of focus in on what they need to be doing, right? So if they beat offensive tackles in pass rush, that doesn't mean anything because they're not getting pressure because quarterbacks can get rid of the ball because there's not very good coverage, right? Donatello is always late to adjust. So to me, I think that this is probably a D team, right? Because if you end up with a really good second half of football, but in the first half you give up like 24 points, that's not like good, right? Especially in a low-scoring offensive environment that we're in right now. Like that just means you gave up the points at a particular time. It doesn't mean that you became a good defense. So yeah, I think I'm going to stick with a D.
Spinman?
Yeah, not too much to add there. I'll go with the C minus, I guess. 27th in the league in yards allowed, but only 12th in points. So a little bit of bend but not break defense thing going on. But this is not your Mike Zimmer bend and don't break defense. There's no exotic blitzes or looks on 3rd and long. There's no different wrinkles or packages yet. And I think the thing with Ed Donatel playing this loose shell coverage that everybody likes to mention is that I just don't think he's super comfortable or confident playing that normal Kubiak cover 1 system that we're used to seeing and getting this safety down in the box. They've allowed 7 rushing touchdowns already. Granted, that Philly game kind of put an asterisk by that stat, but 7 rushing touchdowns. It's not great. I think they're 20th going into this week 4 in run stop win rate and 28th in pass rush win rate going into this week. I can't imagine that'll be that much better. If anything, maybe even worse. So bottom in the league in multiple categories. And again, Ed Donatel, I hate to keep leaning on a guy like Andrew Booth. Maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I think they just need some fresh legs and somebody with a little bit better talent like Andrew Booth back there and healthier. I'm not saying it's going to make the world of difference by any means, but I think clearly, like Arif mentioned, a lot of the communication and issues coming in that back end in the secondary. And I think maybe once they figure some of that stuff out, maybe you'll see a little bit of improvement, but it's like similar to the offense that we're saying, okay, you see some potential, you expect to get better. Well, yeah, we have a lot more confidence in the offense getting better over the next few weeks with KOC and a guy like Kurt and all the weapons. Defensively with Ed Donatel and the talent that he's working with, I just don't think that many fans are feeling very confident or comfortable that they will continue to get better over these next few weeks. Because clearly, like the offense, again, it's a new system. They're still figuring things out. But how long of a grace period are we going to give them? Because until we start seeing some improvement, specifically in the run game, I don't think there's much reason to be optimistic, unlike what we are with the offensive side of the ball. So, yeah, C minus. And again, moving forward, I just don't see a lot of room for optimism right now.
Yeah, not loving the Donatel experience so far. And we forget that the Vikings defense actually did some pretty good stuff last year, which is crazy to say because the total points allowed, the late game meltdowns were inexcusable. But they were top 5 in turnover differential. They were top 5 in sacks. They were top 5 in third downs against. There was a lot of good stuff there. And when you see this team sort of sitting back, they have the 4th lowest blitz percentage in the league, 13%. So Mike Zimmer, even when his defense and his coverage was struggling, he was going to find a way to make the quarterback uncomfortable, and you could kind of count on that. And a lot of times it would work when you would get teams with their backs against the wall. That's when Zimmer really thrived. The ceiling of this defense feels low. I will give them a C-, which is on the high end, I think, only because of the points allowed, because they have been able to create some opportune turnovers and stop teams in their territory and come up with some big, timely plays. I will give them a C-, but maybe it belongs more in that D range. A couple more grades I want to give out. We've been Debbie Downers, but now we can talk about some good stuff. Special teams. Let's start with Arif. Special teams. Matt Daniels. Is he really the greatest special teams coordinator of all time, or is he just the second best?
I think he's got a little bit of catching up to do to catch Dave Tube, but after what Tube did the last 2 weeks, what Matt Daniels does the last 2 weeks, it's going to be a little bit easier. Obviously he's not going to be here for long. He's obviously going to get some head coaching opportunities with the performances that he's put together. But it's been really fun to see. I think that he's done some creative stuff like creating better field position for the Vikings by manipulating the kickoffs to get the opposing offenses to start at the 15 as opposed to the 25. I think that's really good. Trying to focus on that, taking advantage of what Greg Joseph does, making Greg Joseph a better kicker. I mean, Greg Joseph has been at 3 separate stops, if you include the Vikings as a separate stop, with the Titans, the Browns, and in the Zimmer era Vikings, and he's never been this good. I think that's really fantastic. I think you can forgive him for the missed extra point, given all the long field goals he's been able to make. I think that's pretty fantastic. Picking Ryan Wright over Jordan Berry, I thought that was a mistake. I was wrong. He did a great job adjudicating that punter position, and Ryan Wright has been phenomenal as a punter. He's been really great. I think that he's a top 5 punter in the league right now, which is crazy. We only have like 4 games, so that could change. But the entire operation seems to be doing really, really well. I mean, the kickoff coverage is great. The punt coverage is great. The kickoff return is okay. I guess that's probably the one area where you'd want to see a little bit more. And then I kind of wish we'd seen more punt returns, but we don't see many for some reason. So we'll be able to evaluate that a little bit more. But Jalen Reagor has been fine at punt return.
So what was the grade? I missed it. A?
Let's give him an A.
Nice. I like it. He deserves it. Luke Inman?
Yeah, I got to go with an A as well. Matt Daniels just been a beast for this unit. As Arif mentioned, he's got guys playing at a really high level in all facets of that special teams game. The guts it takes, like Arif mentioned, to cut the vet punter before the season, roll with the undrafted kid. I think that spoke volumes of his confidence in his ability to kind of assess and evaluate talent. He's making himself look good right now with that move. Joseph been pretty lights out for the most part. Kene and Reagor look solid so far on kick return and punt return. And then you got things like the blocked field goal in Philly and the fake punt. That's how you get from a B grade to an A, I think. The call, the execution, knowing Ryan Wright was a quarterback in high school, doing the homework, the due diligence. He's really so far panned out to be a really great special teams coach, and he's really stood out in a great way and been a great addition to the Viking squad. And I think, honestly, the cliche is true. Special teams will win or lose 2 to 3 games a year. And certainly so far, I think the difference, in the Vikings being 2-2 and where they're sitting at right now and 3-3 certainly has a lot to do with the special teams unit. So yeah, I'll give an A.
Yeah, the X factor in the last 2 games, I would say, and it's that extra stuff. It's a blocked field goal, a fake punt executed, a forced fumble on punt coverage yesterday, a game-winning field goal yesterday, all that stuff. They're second in kickoff coverage as well. Drive start has been really good, and they've occasionally flashed with some big kick returns or big punt returns. And when I say big, I mean, past the 25 or maybe a 15-yard punt return. All that is very, very good. I give an A. Will Ragatz, would you give anything except an A?
No, I'll complete the sweep of A's here. I mean, they're just coming up with 1 to 2 or more big plays every game that are like making a difference. And then it's not just that. It's like he just seems to have created this really, really good buy-in with all the units, with coverage, return, where guys are blocking really hard and guys are flying downfield. Like last week, Brian Asamoah flies downfield on kick coverage and makes an incredible tackle. Like he just seems to have gotten everybody to really value special teams and how important it can be. And I mean, the Vikings know that better than a lot of teams. Obviously, go back a long time, but just recently in 2020, they were like 31st in special teams DVOA. That unit was really, really bad, kind of a disaster. Then last year under Ryan Ficken, they get a lot better. And then Ficken leaves during the regime change, and it was like, all right, are they going to maybe regress? But no, they've just continued to ascend and get better. And Matt Daniels deserves a ton of credit for that. And we'll put, maybe it's been 4 games. Like, let's see this continue over the full season. But so far, you can't ask for anything more.
All right, I haven't started yet, so I will kick off the coaching grades. This is tough. This is tough. I think that Kevin O'Connell is a positive figure to rally around, and we're just talking about O'Connell here. I think that there's value in his approach, and I think he gets like a B for that. Like, I think that if that's the extra 1% that like helps this team fight for him or play for each other or have cohesion, I think there's value in that. And they seem to appreciate the fun and not getting cursed out. Like, there's a lot of young players in football now, like guys that had college coaches. They kind of had that same mentality, the PJ Fleck types that are going to be positive, energetic, and they're used to that and they want that. So I think it's on the high end for the intangibles, but I think the football stuff is closer to a C- or a D+, because game management has been shoddy. Whether it's timeout usage, end of half, going for choosing run plays on 2nd and 10, which is my personal pet peeve. I don't see a lot of creativity. I don't necessarily see those little nuances in the course of the game, the play sequencing. I like that he does some tempo sometimes. I like his opening script in a couple of these games. But I'm not a gigantic fan of the X's and O's O'Connell so far. So I'm going to average out like the personality and the football stuff with a little more weight on the football stuff, and I'm going to say a C. Luke?
Yeah, I'll say a C+. A lot of the same reasons, I think. With what he's given, again, he's the offensive mind. He's, the offense is his kind of baby. Hasn't obviously lived up to expectations so far. Ed Donatel kind of letting him do his own thing on defense. When I just look at this as a whole right now, I see the potential is there for sure. And I think a lot of people expect this offense to get better gradually, week by week. But right now, through 4 weeks, the intangibles for sure are there. But you're right. A lot of people going from that Mike Zimmer era, horrible clock management, very ultra conservative, let the defense win these games, never go for it on 4th down. We thought that would change so far through 4 weeks through KOC, and it just hasn't. So I'll go with the C+ for a lot of the same reasons.
Arif?
I'll be a little bit more optimistic here, which I think is unusual for me on the show. I'm going to go with a B-. I think that the culture stuff matters a little bit. Certainly what Sam said, I think is true about ways that like players buy in. I think that's made a difference and it's really helped them when it comes to, overcoming deficits and stuff like that. But I think more importantly, the X's and O's stuff, I agree that this is all very frustrating because I don't think we're seeing kind of the things that we're seeing. I think that the whole point of like when you have someone like Justin, you can always take advantage of the presence on the field. Whether that means, finding a way to open them up and give them opportunities to get yards themselves or find ways to get yards otherwise. But, we haven't seen that. We also haven't seen very much in the way of enabling Dalvin Cook. And this is supposed to be kind of a run game atmosphere. But I think when it comes to I think those opening scripts are phenomenal. But when it comes down to finding hidden advantages, he's actually doing an okay job at that. I think that, the fact that the Vikings are 3-1, even though they don't feel like they're a very good team, I think some of that has to do with his coaching. I think a lot of it has to do with some of the stuff that he's been able to do on the fringes, whether that means, motioning Adam Thielen here or putting Justin Jefferson in the backfield here or lining up Alexander Madison out wide. He's been great at screen design. I think that that's actually really helpful. But on top of that, sorry about the PA, but on top of that, I think that his game management is better than Zimmer's. It's been bad, but it's been better than Zimmer's, right? I think that, we've seen a better usage of timeouts. This is a long PA announcement. This is crazy. But, and I think that we've seen, better decisions on 4th down. I think the Lions game is a good example of, when he went in 4th down a lot. We didn't see it in this game, but we saw it a little bit in the Lions game. We saw a little bit in the Eagles game. I think that that's fine. So I think that, he could be doing a lot better, right? But I think the reason that they're 3-1 despite playing poorly, some of that has to do with coaching. Some of it's luck. I think some of it's coaching. So I'm going to go with a B-.
Thanks, Arif, and don't leave your bag unattended. Will Ragatz, round it out.
Yeah, I'm willing to give O'Connell a B for pretty much the same reasons that Arif just echoed, like Arif just said. Like, I think it's fair to question how much of the close game luck is coaching versus how much is luck. But I'm going to give them credit for it because they're 3-1 and they're winning these close games. And I'm really bullish on O'Connell just as a leader to start. Like, I think he's really like the culture change stuff. I think that's real. The buy-in, I think that's real. And then schematically, X's and O's wise, yeah, there's a lot of improvements to make, but it's early. And I think that they will make adjustments and that, he will continue finding the ways to get the ball to his playmakers and make things easy on Kirk Cousins to the whatever extent he can. And yeah, I've been impressed by the opening scripts. I mean, yesterday was a great example. They get 3rd and goal from the 15 and they drop a great screen to Alexander Madison to score a touchdown there. I think his game management, there was maybe we're a little like recency biased because the end of the first half yesterday was just kind of weird with not using timeouts and maybe could have gone for it on 4th down there after Johnny Munt dropped that pass. But I think for the most part, it's been fine. I haven't really like come away from most of these games thinking that game management is going to be an issue this year. So I'm willing to give O'Connell a B through 4 weeks with the knowledge that he is probably the first person to tell you it hasn't gone completely to plan so far, but they're winning games anyways, which provides kind of a good foundation to keep improving and keep kind of building out what he wants this team to be, especially on offense.
Yeah, you do like the accountability that he's shown, and you do like that he kind of has Sean McVay in his ear, too. They pounded that story into the ground on the broadcast yesterday, talking about how they are still texting and talking quite a bit. We're going to do a 4-minute drill and an injury update coming up. Just a reminder to subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available, and we are also free and available on YouTube, where you can like, comment, and subscribe. Locked On Sports Minnesota. Hey, comment with your coaching grade, quarterback grade, offensive grade below in the comment section. Leaving a comment helps other people discover the show. And once more, we are available on the Amazon Fire and Roku apps, the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, a fantastic viewing experience. Lewis Cine injured badly yesterday. Luke Inman, videos on Twitter, you posted it. Maybe be careful if you watch it. Arif Hasan, you saw the replay in building. Pretty bad scene there. And maybe, Arif, you can take us through what that was like in the stadium because we really didn't get a taste on NFL Network at all. We didn't see the replay, and they really went to commercial for most of it. So what was that moment like?
I mean, it was pretty somber, right? I think that the rest of the stadium, it took them a little bit of time to kind of understand the gravity of the moment. Thankfully, the replay was not played on the giant boards. That would have been, I think, pretty disrespectful. But we did get to see a little bit of it on the tiny little monitors they gave the press, and I mean, it was absolutely gruesome. And I think that when the second round of trainers came out, these are the ones that put the Aircast on. I think everyone had a really big understanding of how serious this was. The players on both teams were already kneeling pretty quickly. So there was a somber moment, and this is like a very festive environment, right? Because London games are not just football games, which are already, pretty festive, but they're events, right? They were treating it like an event. They had MCs basically in the stadium, right? It was wild. I'd never seen anything like it. And so to have kind of all of that tamped down and somber, I think that really put something on top of it that I think really kind of brought the gravity of that, home. And I think, it was nice to see the fans that were really respectful of kind of everything that was happening. And, as he was carted off, they shouted out words of encouragement and stuff like that, which actually you don't actually see a ton of. Yeah, that was nice to see, but it was certainly kind of a sobering moment.
Yeah. So having not really watched it myself and just trying to understand more of what he's dealing with from a recovery standpoint, are we talking like compound fracture, Arif?
I don't know what kind of fracture. It happened quickly. God, I hate talking about it. It seemed to happen quickly, so it could be a simple fracture. And if that's the case, obviously that's a lot better. That heals faster, and it has a less likelihood of, creating complications down the road or creating setbacks or impacting him athletically, which obviously is going to be important to him as you go on. But yeah, I mean, it reminds me of like Livingston, right? Like it's that Sean Livingston, where it took a while to get fully healthy. I mean, to me, based off of what I saw, not a doctor, don't know anything, it's really less a question of if he's going to be back in a year, and more a question of can he be back in a year and a half, maybe. Like it was really gruesome looking.
Yeah. No, this is going to affect his career for sure. That's so rough for Lewis Cine. Dealt with the knee injury early on, battled back. We were waiting to kind of see him unleashed, and now that won't happen for quite a long time, and kind of continues this tough stretch for the Vikings too of first-round draft picks, injuries. It's been kind of an alarming trend. Not that there's anything the Vikings can do about that. Injuries in general, Will Ragatz, Cine, obviously, and then you've got Thielen limping around with a calf. I think Harrison Smith's going to be okay after his little issue, but Kendricks missed a little bit of time. Za'Darius and Cook obviously were limited in their ability yesterday. So how do you stack up the injury situation in general?
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's something you're going to run into during a football season, especially maybe when you have a little bit more of a veteran-heavy team. I don't know the details of any of the other players. I know Harrison Smith seemed to avoid anything serious, might have just gotten a hit in a sensitive area. I'll say on Cine, like, you see just in Kevin O'Connell's comments and some of the player comments, like how much he means to that team and how much of an impact he's already had in the locker room as a rookie, by all accounts. I mean, we've talked to him. He seems like a great kid. So you feel awful for him. I will say also that I'm glad that NFL Network did not show the replay. It's one of those things where, yeah, obviously it's going to end up on Twitter. Like if you want to see it, you'll be able to, but I'm glad they didn't broadcast it, especially when like a few days earlier, Amazon Prime insisted on showing Tua Tagovailoa like mashing his head against the ground like 6 times. And that was just,
right.
That felt really disrespectful to me. So I'm glad that NFL Network did not go that route.
Yeah, Luke Inman, you've been really bullish, speaking of injured players, about Andrew Booth. Like, you think that when Andrew Booth comes back, that's going to have a big impact on this secondary. And with Cam Dantzler, being a little shaken up, maybe that happens sooner than later. Hey, maybe even against Chicago. What do you make of his possible impact on this defense?
Well, I don't know if he'll have a big impact. I'm hoping he will. Remember, a lot of people had a first-round grade on him coming out. The injury knocks is what kind of, made him fall into the second round of the laps of the Vikes. But I just think Ed Donatel, when I look at, the lack of creativity, the sub packages, the wrinkles that he's used. You mentioned how little he's chosen to drop, the blitzes as well. I think he just doesn't feel like he has the guys in the back end specifically to leave out on islands, Pat P, Cam Dantzler, Chandon Sullivan, whoever it may be on any given play, to drop a little bit more aggressiveness in those game plans, especially on third down, third and long, those situations. Maybe Andrew Booth can help that. He's certainly not going to be, this golden child that comes in and all of a sudden is the saving grace for the defense by any means, but maybe just injecting a little bit of youth, some fresh legs, and again, a more physical, big-bodied corner that maybe he feels a little bit more confident leaving out on an island in one-on-one situations, and then allows you to drop a couple more aggressive looks. Maybe you bring a safety down in the box on a blitz. We finally saw Harrison Smith on a blitz yesterday, and things turned out good. I think he had a tackle for loss or a loss for no gain on a running play. But, switching some things up here is going to be vital for this defense if they want to improve from where they're at right now. And I think, anything to start switching it up, like getting a guy like Andrew Booth could certainly help. We don't know if it will or not. He could go through these rookie lumps like a lot of rookies go through and probably be inconsistent, especially the first month or two. But I think the talent was there coming out of Clemson on film that, he could turn into number 2 or maybe even number 1 guy. Certainly not anytime soon, but down the road. But he needs to get these reps. He needs to get on the field sooner than later. And as far as just the injuries in general for the Vikes, I mean, Will mentioned it. It's the NFL. You're just never going to be close to 100% at any point in the season. And I think, all in all, I think the Vikings are probably in better shape than the majority of teams out there right now. Up until the Lewis Cine injury yesterday, I think the Vikes made it, all preseason, all training camp, 3 full weeks of the season, and just had one semi-big name go down with a season-long injury, and that was BC Johnson. So a lot of guys dinged up, but that's pretty normal at this point. I think the big key, though, is the majority are just dings. Guys aren't being shelled for long chunks of the season like we've seen in years past, like Danielle Hunter, just for example. That bye week probably sounds pretty good right now, but, they elected to push that back a few weeks. Hopefully they can get through these next 2 games without any more major injuries, but that's why you draft depth, too, whether it's Josh Metellus for Harry or Asamoah or Troy Dye for Kendricks, Madison and Kenne. We know they got great depth. If Dalvin were to miss a game or two, Wanham, Patrick Jones for Za'Darius, who seems a little dinged up. But circling back, I think Andrew Booth should be back in the mix this week. Just based off the injury report last week, it sounds like he was maybe a 50-50 to go in London. Hopefully you start seeing him on the injury report start to be upgraded from, doubtful to questionable, hopefully probable this week.
And their willingness to use a Caleb Evans kind of proves to me that they'll probably be willing to use Andrew Booth if he's healthy enough to go. Before our 4-minute drill, let's update our gambling from last week. We had a few guys treading water. Arif Hasan, 1-1. Sam Ekstrom, 1-1. Luke Braun, 1-1. But we did have somebody go 0-2, and that was our leader, Luke Inman, coming back to the pack. Ooh, Luke, the Jags let you down, and the Ravens and Bills didn't score many points either. How do you feel today?
I feel fine. We'll bounce back. It's a hit the reset button and, got to have a short memory in this league, Sam. I think we'll be okay.
Very steady approach of you. We will make our picks on Thursday's show for this upcoming week. We might have a guest picker for Braun. That's an interesting element because if you miss a show, you don't have the right to pick. I mean, someone else has to pick for you. So on Thursday, I don't know if Braun might be gallivanting in the London countryside still, and we'll have to have someone pick for him. 4-minute drill here, our final. Yeah, well.
English countryside, Sam?
What did I say? British?
You said London.
London?
You said London.
London doesn't have countryside?
Gotta go a little further
You're
away.
telling me that the city of London doesn't have rural areas? Our final little exercise of the show is our 4-minute drill. We all get 1 minute to argue our case, and I think it's a difficult exercise, so I'm going to challenge us here. I want us each to spend a minute trying to explain what the identity of this offense is. What is it? I don't think anybody knows, but I want us to take a crack at it. We'll let Arif Hasan go first. Wahlburgers in Boston. Arif,
see the timer on
go.
the screen. All right, I'm going to say, I don't really know what's going on there. I don't think that there is an identity for the offense. I think that, when you ask what the identity of an offense is, you ask basically what do they want to do and what are the base plays, right? And I don't think the Vikings have a base play. I don't think they've got a running base play. I don't think they've got a passing base play. I don't think they've got an understanding of the things that they want to do, right? In the Zimmer era, you would say, hey, the Vikings want to run the ball and they want to do play action. They want to play action. They want to make sure that they get some of these deep shots in. I don't know what the Vikings want to do. Do they just want to confuse people? That's not a base play. What happens when you're down in the dirt and you need to dig into something that that you're comfortable with? What play are you going to call upon? I don't think the Vikings have that. So to me, they don't have an identity. We don't know if they like to run the ball. We don't know if they like to throw the ball. We don't know where they like to throw the ball. We don't know how they want to run the ball. They're not even a zone running team all that much anymore. They're doing as much gap running as they've been doing zone running. So what they specialize in, what they do, how they attack opponents, there's no identity. I think that they want to be a matchup team. I think they want to be a complex team that attacks people like Belichick does. It isolates offenses by attacking weak points, but that's not what this team does. So in terms of the things that it wants to do, it doesn't do that. In terms of things it can do, we don't know what those are.
Will Ragatz, SI.com. Your minute in the 4-minute drill starts now.
All right. Well, I don't want to like agree too much with Arif, but I kind of have to because hey, he's a smart guy. We don't know what the Vikings' identity is yet on offense, and I think we know what like they vision is, like what they want it to be. Well, all right. I think Kevin O'Connell wants to be a team that his offense wants to run a lot of 11 personnel. When Justin Jefferson is not being double and triple covered, they're going to funnel the ball to Justin Jefferson because he is kind of a uniquely talented receiver, and it's going to start with him, and then the other pieces will fall into place beyond that. They want to get Dalvin Cook going on the ground. They haven't really done that yet, but they want to find ways to maybe get Dalvin Cook the ball in space. They want to take advantage of the versatility of their tight ends with Irv Smith Jr. being a guy who can run intermediate to even deep routes, Johnny Munt and Ben Ellefson having some like multiplicity with their ability to block and then leak out for underneath routes. And they just want to be a team that kind of marries the run in the pass and makes things look different. But we haven't seen a lot of success of that so far.
Yeah, I'll go next. I think you guys make salient points. I think I would boil it down as simply as I can and say that they are passing to set up the run, and their play selection would indicate that. And it's not as if they've been trailing by large margins in these games, like they've been either ahead or very close in all these games, so kind of everything's been on the table. And they are 6th in pass attempts and 24th in rush attempts, and that is a huge difference from the previous era. So at minimum, you can say that there is an adaptation here. They are passing more and running less. And I think that's sort of the direction that you want to move in. And I thought that the Green Bay game was the perfect example of passing early. Remember, they had that masterpiece drive where I think they threw 8 out of 10 times, opened the scoring to open the season, and then they ran it really well in the second half and iced that game away when they had a lead. I think that's the formula they want to use. But I appreciate that at least the play selection is typically more modern. And except for those 2nd and 10 runs which drive me crazy, it's been pretty good. Luke Inman.
No, I think all you guys are right. There's not much of an identity right now. It's still an offense that when they do run the ball, though, they want to run it effectively. Don't think I'm going on a crazy limb there, and create mismatches with that pre-snap motion, that window dressing, whether it's 11 personnel or it's Kirk under center with a fullback and a tight end on the field. Problem right now, running game's just not been effective. Dalvin, kind of a boomer bust runner. Problem is when you're not getting even just 2-3 yards on some of those runs, like he had a hard time yesterday, it makes life so much harder once you get to 3rd down because now they pin their ears back. Kirk's just looking panicky, feels pressured, not keeping his eyes up downfield, just like the 3rd and goal when he missed Jefferson in the corner of the end zone, instead went to Thielen underneath. So I think once they find a little bit more rhythm and balance and better marriage, like Will said, between the run and the pass game, you'll see Kirk afforded more time in the pocket where it really shines. And then you'll see this offense clicking a little bit more like we thought it would. The core identity, though, I think is always going to be the 11 personnel running that 3 wide receiver look the majority of time. KJ Osborne yesterday, 61 snaps, 85% of the plays yesterday. So that's their bread and butter for sure.
Hey, did Sharp Football go paywall? Because I used to rely on Sharp for my like personnel groupings, and it's not there this year. Does anybody know? Anyone?
No idea.
I used to do that too. I've gone to there and it just says 2021. Like it doesn't appear to be an option to update it to 2022. So I don't know if that will be the case at some point or not. But
yeah, if any data people out there can tell me where to find personnel stuff, at Sam Ekstrom on Twitter. In closing, Will, we'd like to give our party foul for the week. That's the biggest faux pas or blunder that you witnessed in culture, sports, or your personal life. Matt DeBritz, run it.
I got an easy one. Just
Luke.
real quick. Rodgers calling out his center for not snapping the ball, caught on mic for the world to hear was great, dropping a massive F-bomb. For then Tony Romo to then sit there to dissect a little bit was even more hilarious. But that's the one I'm going with this week. I thought that was great. If you haven't seen it, you got to go check it out.
Phenomenal. Arif?
Yeah, I'm going to harsh the vibe a little bit. I'll talk about the Miami Dolphins. I think that they certainly deserve this party foul. I think John Harbaugh was right when he was like, I've never seen that in my life. I think that the NFLPA's most recent statement is probably the most correct one. I feel like they've been playing this one a little bit weird, but essentially, if Tua's back injury was so bad, that he had instability, he shouldn't be out there, right? If it was in fact a back injury. And I think there's a reasonable amount of suspicion from actual neurologists that it probably wasn't a back injury. And in consulting with neurologists, the NFLPA ended up firing the doctor that evaluated Tua Tagovailoa. So either way, there's a reason to believe there was a lot of concern about Tua's long-term and short-term health. And I'm going to put it on the Miami Dolphins for putting him out there. Now, obviously, you cannot predict from play to play whether or not somebody is going to suffer a re-injury, but the risk of re-injury is pretty high, and the impact of re-injury is remarkably high. Just ask Joffin Best, right? What can happen when somebody with a concussion gets in that concussion. So that's on Miami for not protecting player health. I think the NFLPA is not handling this as well as they could because it seems like they're shifting their focus or their blame or what they're trying to accomplish. They should have been clear from the start, but I think that they're fighting the right fight essentially. And Mike McDaniel handled it poorly.
Yeah, how about the Gophers stubbing their toe against Purdue on Saturday? Particularly the play where they dropped the touchdown and the ball popped in the air into Purdue guys' hands. It was that kind of day. And the Gophers tend to do this. They kind of have their own version of Vikings-Bills 2018. They do this against inferior teams once or twice a year. And I guess we'll have to table the national championship preview that I was planning. I thought it was going to be Gophers, Alabama, like tail of the tape. And now we're stuck talking about Illinois and other boring teams.
James Madison football remains undefeated. Just put that out there.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah, Northwestern football is 1-4, so that's not what I was going to go with. But the Gophers are still in a much better position than my squad. I will go with the game I watched in the noon window yesterday, which was the Ravens-Bills, and the Ravens not only blowing a 20-3 lead, but having the ball in a tie game at 2020 in the low red zone, and just having an opportunity to kick a field goal and take the lead. And John Harbaugh, it wasn't so much that he went for it because I kind of like the aggressiveness to go for it on 4th and goal. It was the play call where he had Lamar, I think he was in the shotgun, and then he just immediately is rolling to his right, and it just got really muddied up in the end zone, and it never had a chance. And he'd like to take advantage of Lamar's legs more with maybe a zone read or do something, or maybe even just kick the field goal. I didn't like the way John Harbaugh handled that whole situation there.
Harbaugh's got some serious cojones. It helps when you win a Super Bowl. You get a lot of leash, and you can make those kind of decisions. I still respect it, but he seems to be on the wrong side of a lot of those in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and then Marcus Peters barking at his head coach, John Harbaugh, afterwards, too. They were getting heated, too, which, you love the drama, from the outside looking in, but holy smokes.
I'm here for it. Luke Inman, at Luke_Spinman, Superior Sports Talk. Check him out with Reggie Wilson of Care 11. Arif Hasan, Pro Football Network, back now from London. He'll be back on the show on Thursday. Will Ragatz in for the Gallivanter himself, Luke Braun. He's at Will Ragatz, SI.com, Inside the Vikings. Thanks for joining us, Will.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, we kept you a little overtime as well. And I'm Sam Ekstrom. We'll talk to everyone on Thursday. Like, comment, subscribe on the YouTube channel. It's Locked On Sports Minnesota.